Can this new addition make a big impact?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams, and we got some interesting news late Monday afternoon as Jacob Henry, the son of WWE Hall of Famer Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, Jacob being a member of the Oklahoma wrestling team, posted a picture of his name above an Oklahoma football locker next to one Trent Wilson. Also, Jay, as you pointed out, changed his bio on X/Twitter to read Oklahoma defensive tackle or defensive tackle at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, he did that there as well as on his Instagram. So his Instagram actually says
It's
that
it's official now.
Yeah, it's official. This dude is like, we're now X/Instagram official. He is going to be playing football, or at least trying out for football here in the spring, and potentially being part of the roster. And I think it's a lot bigger of a move than fans understand. I dropped a video over on my channel as well and talked about it late last night. But the one thing that jumped out to me on this is that we had talked about this before, John. Oklahoma spring portal wise was going to have to go get another defensive lineman, mainly defensive tackle. And it's mainly because we don't have a bunch of young players there. Trent Wilson was the only one that we brought in this past class. And so you're probably going to want to add an additional young defensive lineman, one that probably hasn't gotten a lot of play, one that's going to be, not super expensive to start, but you are willing to be able to develop. Because once you hit this salary cap league coming next season, you're going to have to get players that match not only the roster, but also the pay scale. You're going to be limited in the way that you're going to be able to spend money. So you can't just throw all this money out and put, $2 million on every single player that you go pick up. So because of that, I was sensing that Oklahoma, and we talked about this, that they will go after a linebacker, probably a young linebacker, a veteran corner, as well as a young defensive lineman just to shore up the roster. Well, Jacob seems to come in and fill that spot. 6 foot, 285 pounds. He was a runner-up 6A wrestler in Texas. He's in the Austin area. I think Vandergrift was the school that he finished at, but he also played at Lake Travis, where Baker Mayfield plays. So he feels a need currently, but I still think that Oklahoma's going to go after another defensive lineman in the portal.
Well, they're going to try to add competitive depth, but you look at the kid. And I think probably what knocked him coming out of high school was his height. Mm-hmm. You don't typically see a lot of 6-foot defensive tackles thriving at the SEC or the NFL level. But you look at his size, he's got the 285-pound frame, and that's good enough weight to be able to play a 3-technique defensive tackle. He might not be able to bulk up enough to be a 330-pound nose tackle, but with the way that the kid moves, if you go back and you watch some of the highlights coming out of high school, he moves really, really well. And you wouldn't expect anything less for a guy who's a wrestler, right? You expect him to be highly athletic, quick off the line of scrimmage. And those things show up when you watch the highlights. He's able to dart through the offensive line. He's able to work around guards, get to the quarterback, and he's got a good motor. So I think this is it's an intriguing addition. Whether he's able to break into the defensive tackle rotation over the next couple of years, we'll see. But at the very least, you add a very promising potential depth piece that you can develop and potentially make a part of your defensive tackle rotation in the future. I like his game, and I think there's a lot to like about this addition.
And in the way that the NFL is played today, his size is still a size that actually does have an opportunity to thrive. I mean, the only other example is probably considered one of the greatest ones to play in the game is Aaron Donald, right? He's 6'1", 280 pounds. Now, granted, I'm not saying that Jacob Henry is the next Aaron Donald, but I'm also not saying that he isn't, mainly because you don't know. You don't know until he goes out in the field and he shows you. And the big thing that jumped out to me was the fact that he's a wrestler, right? And so talk about like Owen Hollenbeck. That was the one thing that excites me about him at center is being a wrestler and a state champion wrestler and power lifter, the toughest thing to get around, the toughest thing to do is get around a guy with strength and the ability to wrestle, because they know how to use their hands and keep you from being able to get leverage on them, regardless of your size. Now, Owen is like 340 pounds, and he's a legitimate power lifter, so he's got that strength there. Jacob most likely has some of him, his dad's genes in him. He was the world's strongest man is what he called himself, which is, dope. I was raised on that era of wrestling. So, of course, I knew all about Mark Henry, and seeing that his son's going to be playing defensive tackle Oklahoma, it's pretty exciting. Didn't his dad go to Texas too?
His dad went to Texas. So that's
God, it just
Red
feels
River,
good to just
really, really interesting.
snatch away a legacy like that. It just, warms your heart a little bit.
The other thing that's really fascinating about this is wrestlers work. Like, they know how to get in and work. They're not afraid of the weight room, the conditioning stuff, because that's a lot of what you have to be able to do as a wrestler. You can't just go and be a 1 minute show pony. You've got to go and be able to grind out minutes upon minutes upon minutes of high intensity, high cardio, wrestling. And so he's going to be in great shape when he starts, day one. I mean, he said yesterday was day one, but going into winter workouts, going into spring ball, the conditioning is not going to be an issue for him. And
not at all.
Now, I say that, who knows what it's going to be like relative as he goes and works with Jerry Schmidt, but that he's going to be up for the grind. Like, wrestlers in general, especially the high level ones, the ones that can make it to the collegiate level, ones that can be a runner up in a state championship, they are not afraid of the grind. And so that's a really intriguing aspect of this too, is you get a guy with a high motor with some really good tools. You put him through the strength and conditioning program with Oklahoma, and who knows what the potential is.
The sky's the limit for him. Now, I mean, he's not as big as a Trent Wilson, comes in at 6'3", roughly 280. And, Trent's going to probably be your main. He'll probably be, technically Trent could run between 3 technique and nose, depending on how big he gets. But if Jacob puts on the weight, continuously put on the weight, like you said, he gets over 300, he could end up being a nose right there with Jaden Jackson, not only filling up space, but, terrorizing the run game. It feels like adding him as a piece is going to be really big on the run side of it. Like, kind of you made mention of, wrestlers knowing how to move, they're hard workers, they're going to keep going, and he has a motor. Feels like he's going to be a terror when it comes to, stopping the run. So I like the addition. I'm glad that it happened. So it's funny, John, do you remember like all of the chatter about him trying out over the last, 2 months or whatnot? You had the tennis player that everybody's been following, and everyone was overexcited about him. He said if he can get 500 fans to show up to the tennis match, he'll try out for football. And Jacob actually replied underneath his tweet and said, hey, you kind of give me some ideas here, brother, or something of that nature, a paraphrasing, that is. But when I saw that, I was like, that'd be funny if they both decide to come and try out. And then sure enough, here you go. You've got a day one pick. I'm actually curious to how the workout went for him day one.
I can't imagine that it didn't go great. Again, he's got the tools, man. He's got the skills. I think, just a little bit undersized coming out of high school, and obviously probably focusing mostly on wrestling. When you're somebody who's being recruited as a wrestler and your dad's a wrestler, albeit was at the sports entertainment level of that. And Jacob's already kind of been in the doors with WWE and started kind of breaking down those NIL potential opportunities as well. So it's going to be interesting. I think he's got the tools to be a rotational guy at some point in his Oklahoma Sooners career. Oklahoma's been a really good school at unearthing walk-on talent. So Don't sleep on them just yet. Will it happen overnight? I'm not going to bank on that, but I'm also not going to doubt the kid. We'll see.
Me either.
What's the most important game of the 2025 season aside from Texas? Because we know that's always the most important game, but what's the most important game after that? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go about your day, no stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is taxes Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Jay, if you're looking at the 2025 schedule, I think you could probably name a number of games that are the next most important game on the schedule after Texas. What is it for you, though, the one that stands out the most?
This was a little bit tougher for me when we kind of talked about it, because I had to ask myself, is it going to be a home game? Is it going to be a road game? Is it going to be early? Is it going to be late? And besides the fact that this entire season is critical for, just the livelihood of our entire coaching staff. Yeah. But if I had to pick one, it's got to be that Michigan game at home. It's going to be that one that's going to be the mood setter. It's going to be the one that tells us, it's going to be the pulse reader for us, for lack of better terms. It's going to one that's going to tell us if this offense is, legitimate or not. It's going to tell us if Ben Arbuckle was real or not. It's going to be the one that's going to tell us all of that. Because truth be told, I have no concerns on the defensive side of the ball, especially going against Michigan. Now, I know they got Bryce Underwood, who I think is going to be a monster at the collegiate level, but Michigan hasn't shown us that they can get a quarterback to really get going over the last 10 years. Like, it has not been a situation where no matter who's been the coach, it just hasn't felt like a quarterback has figured out how to play football again. I mean, the last one was Denard Robinson, and for the most part, Denard was a running back out there at quarterback. So I haven't seen them actually show us anything. I mean, they've got with Jaden Davis as well as another backup he's a true freshman this past year, so he'll be a redshirt freshman going into next season. So the question is, can Jaden win the job away from Bryce Underwood, in which we're all expecting, Bryce to walk in as a true freshman, but bringing a true freshman here into Norman against this defense? Oh yeah, let me have that game too. I may be more concerned about Bryce around, the week 11, but right now, absolutely not. But this is the game to me that's really going to set the tone of what this team's going to be. Which game was the one that jumped out to you as second in command behind that Texas game?
Yeah, I think the Michigan one is a really, really good choice, because we're going to find out a lot about what this team's about coming into the 2025 season. If they go and they beat Michigan and they do it convincingly, say they do it by double digits, similar to what Texas did this past year, I think it's going to make you feel a certain kind of way about where Oklahoma's going. Now, for me, I'm going to still want them to prove it each and every single week, because you're going to have bigger tests throughout the 2025 season. And I think the game that really means a lot to Oklahoma, and I think that it's going to be the one that has significant implications on their college football playoff aspirations, it's that Tennessee game on November 1st. You're coming out of a stretch where you play Texas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, right before you go into a bye week. And then you come out of the bye week and you play at Alabama, Missouri, and LSU to finish the season. You've got to have good vibes coming out of that Tennessee game.
It's true.
If you go to Neyland Stadium and you get beat by double digits like you did this last year against Josh Heupel going into the bye, you can probably kiss the college football playoff goodbye. I mean, yeah. I don't want to be that big of a Debbie Downer about one game, because what if Oklahoma is undefeated going into that one and they lose it? I don't think it's the end of the world, but I don't necessarily expect Oklahoma to be undefeated going into that November 1st game. If you're sitting at, 8-1 going into the bye, I think you're in a great spot. If you're sitting at 7-2 going into the bye with Alabama, Mizzou, and LSU coming up, I don't love it so much. So you got to get that win over Tennessee coming out of or going into the bye week, because especially that 4-game stretch, there's no reprieve. There's Texas, there's South Carolina, at South Carolina, there's Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss is going to be a very different looking team this next season than what they were in 2024, when honestly you had them on the ropes in the first half. But I still think that Lane Kiffin's going to put together a pretty good squad that's going to test you coming into Norman. And then you go to Neyland Stadium where you see Nico in year 2 in Josh Heupel's system. I expect him to be better than what he was in year 1. And I think that they're still going to have a good team. And so that's going to be a tough environment, a tough place to play, and it's going to set the tone for that final month of the season. You get a win in that one, and you're flying high with 3 games remaining.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that game's going to be, especially with it being so late in the season, we should have an idea of what this team is. But then at that point, that's the last game of that, like as you mentioned, that long streak of games that you have to play in, like straight. Because I think it's is it 5 games or 6 games straight that you play before you get that next bye week?
You play 5. It starts with Kent State, and then you go Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee. I mean, you can view the Kent State game however you want to view it, but legitimately 5 straight games.
Yeah, that's a lot. If you really think about it, that's a lot.
Especially against the opponents that they have in that stretch.
Yeah, and then wrapping it up on the road against Tennessee, then you get your bye week, and then you got the road game. You go to Tuscaloosa to play against Alabama, and then you get back-to-back home games, in which, still, truth be told, the schedule is still pretty favorable for Oklahoma. For the most part, I guess you could really consider it as 4 straight games. Like you said, Kent State, depending on how you want to feel about that. But you get a bye week right before Kent State, so it's like back-to-back quote-unquote buys, and then you play against Texas. It's going to be still a challenge going up against there. But, no, I think that Tennessee game is going to be very important because this is the year where Nico should show up and show out. This will be year 3 in the system, and typically the 3rd year in a Josh Heupel system, the quarterbacks show up. Now, the question is, what's the wide receiver room going to look like in order to help him out with that? They don't have Dylan Sampson, so you don't have your running back that you technically can carry you throughout the entire year. So it's going to be on Nico's back. Yeah. He's going to have to show us. And I said it last year. I was very much in favor of seeing Nico early last season rather than later because I felt like he was going to be better as the season went on. I mean, he somewhat progressed well enough. Now the question is going to be, what does he look like going into these winter workouts in the spring ball, fall camp? Does he continue to grow, and does he come into the season looking good? Which we'll find out in the first couple of weeks. But yeah, that's a very important game, especially on the road. I think that South Carolina one too is another one that you can toss in the air of, all right, if Oklahoma really wants to show us something, and if South Carolina actually shows up, I guess that's what my question is. Does South Carolina actually continue the same run they did last season?
Yeah, can Lenora Sellers take another step, which I think he's going to be one of the most exciting quarterbacks to watch in college football this year. Can Dylan Stewart take another step in his development? Are they able to replace Kyle Kennard? Is it going to be the same? They're losing guys too, but I think it is going to be a tough South Carolina team. And then coming out of the Texas game, and then you have to go to Columbia. You got to play in Williams-Brice. You got Sandstorm happening against a tough South Carolina team. That's going to be a difficult road game for sure. And so much of it is going to depend on how you play against Texas. I think the vibes coming out of the Texas game are going to be super meaningful, and it's going to tell us a lot about what this team is going to look like over the rest of the season. What's the game like you're most excited for? It's not necessarily the most important, just you as a football fan. What's the game you're most excited for?
The game I'm most excited for? I'm excited about going to Tuscaloosa. Not gonna lie. It's gonna be fun to go out there and see if we can, own the state of Alabama a second year in a row. That would be fun. I'm really excited about that one. I've been to Bryant-Denny before. Awesome stadium. I love the way that they have their video board set up because they've got them in 4 corners. So instead of having one really big one like most stadiums do, they've got 4 of them, and so they're in the corners of the upper deck to where you can always have a visual of a screen at all times, which is pretty cool. I thought that was cool. Pretty innovative to be able to do that. So you technically don't have a bad seat because you've always got one of those TVs in front of you. So I'm excited to get out there and see that game. Outside of that, Michigan. Getting Michigan down here is the second time Oklahoma's played them ever. That is going to be so much fun. It's going to be electric. And then get Sharon Moore making his valiant return back home and then sending him back to his other house with an L. It's going to feel good.
Yeah, I want to get LSU up to Norman. I think Oklahoma's going to play that game a whole lot differently this next year. You're not going to see them leave the cornerbacks out on an island by themselves. That was one of those games where you're in the first half, you're feeling really good about where you're sitting with LSU, and then it just kind of all fell apart. I think Oklahoma, that's going to be one on the schedule that Oklahoma's going to want to get back because they knew they were in that game, despite the offense not really doing a whole lot. You were still kind of in that game in the first half, and then things started getting away from you towards the end of the half. And then obviously the second half was just
the kickoff return is what killed it. I think that destroyed all the momentum.
It really did.
Take the lead, you force a fumble, return it for a touchdown, then you take the lead on a touchdown drive, and then you give up a kickoff right afterwards. And it's like
just killer.
Everything deflated.
Just killer. So you know that one's going to be on Brent Venables' mind when they come to Norman at the end of the 2025 season. What do the SEC quarterback rankings look like according to your boy? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. First, I want to pose this question out there to the YouTubers that follow us here. Where would you rank John Mateer if you were going to rank the SEC quarterbacks? Because you might rank it a little bit differently than me. You might think I'm too high. You might think I'm too low. Yell at me in the comment section. I love to hear it. I love to see your opinions and your feedback. So Jay, tell me how you want to go about this, because I spent a lot of time putting together this list. I reached out to some of our SEC folks here on the Locked On Network to get their takes on it, get their opinions, because apparently I was way too high on Zach Calzada. Because I mean, I saw what he did in Incarnate Word, had some visions of Cam Ward, and thought, oh man, maybe this guy's going to be pretty good. But I had to be reminded that he had some stinko time in the SEC prior. What was most surprising to you about this list, Jay?
So I think the one that jumped out to me the most is that you did have John Mateer ranked 4th with the poster child of college football behind him at 5th. I was a little shocked there. Now I get why you did it. Garrett Nussmeier definitely is your number 1 right now because he's one of the incumbents. Along with Lenore Seller, the two that really played a full season. We don't know about DJ Lagway as far as health-wise, but I think that he has a chance of really showing up and showing out. But I want to know, is it because John Mateer is hardcore about pineapples on pizza where you had to give him the nod into a top 5 spot?
Got to give my man the pineapple bump because I'm a pineapple pizza guy. Since thanks to my mom and dad, big pineapple, Canadian bacon, and jalapeno. Get it all together. The sweet, the spicy, the salty. Chef's
all in one spot. Just savory, just right there. That is a fantastic thing, John. And I'm glad that you accept that in your life, right? I'm glad that your parents introduced you to such a delicacy, such a great dish to enjoy, even outside of Hawaii. It's a fantastic, it just comes together perfect. Like you said, it gives you all three phases of the pizza flavor that you could possibly look for. And John Mateer is one of those guys that defends it. He tweeted it out. Pineapple belongs on pizza. And gosh darn it, man, you are right. Because it does. And to me, that definitely bumps him up in the top 5. But no, on a serious note, John Mateer accounted for 3,900 yards last season. Granted, the competition, whatever you want to say. I mean, he did play Washington. He played against Oregon. He played Boise State. He played against some good teams too. He put up numbers. He showed that he could put up numbers. And if you don't think that that's going to translate next level, then you obviously didn't watch Cam Ward play, right? Like we saw what Cam Ward was able to do. What he did in Incarnate Word, the couple of years at Washington State showed up, and then he did it at Miami again. He kept it going. Granted, the Washington State stints made me stop picking him late in the season because it kind of fell apart, but that's not the point. He went to Miami and put in work. If he had a defense, they would have been in the playoffs. So Mateer's going to walk in with a similar game, but way more mobile to where I can see him showing up. But having Arch, Nico, and Diego behind him was a very interesting choice. You had Jackson Arnold a lot higher than I would have expected at 9.
And some of that comes to my own personal bias for Jackson Arnold. Still love me some Jackson Arnold. I'm sorry, man. I will ride the Jackson Arnold train until he's no longer playing college football. I'm going to still believe because the arm talent is there. The dude's got the arm talent. All it takes is just one season to turn things around. But really, a lot of it comes down to look at the quarterbacks that are kind of behind him. You don't really know what you're going to get with those guys. So, Jackson Arnold at number 9, and then it comes to Marcel Reed at 10. I like Marcel Reed as a runner. I just don't trust him as a passer yet. And then you got Blake Shapen at 11. Have we not seen enough of the Blake Shapen show at this point? I mean, Oklahoma fans are very well acquainted with Blake Shapen, a solid quarterback. Nobody that you feel like is going to carry you to anything. Maybe he's better than I'm giving him credit for. Then you got Gunnar Stockton, again, somebody that he started a college football playoff game, but he was just kind of okay. And he's going to be in a position battle this offseason. Austin Simmons, the Ole Miss people are really excited about him. He just hasn't played a lot. Ty Simpson, again, a guy that people think highly of, but he's going to be in a quarterback battle. And you listen to some of the SEC folks talk, and it's like one bad game, and he could be right out of there. Bo Prabula, dude with a lot of talent. He just hasn't been a starter. So we'll see. And then Zach Calzada, again, a productive year at Incarnate Word, but 2 previous stints in the SEC, and it didn't really go well for him. So, but when it comes to Mateer and Arch, a lot of it just comes down to, is Arch Manning actually going to be able to live up to the hype? Is he going to be able to live up to the monster that is already dubbed him as the Heisman Trophy favorite, Texas as the number 1 team in 2025? Is he going to be able to live up to all of that? Now, if he does, and he goes and he puts together a great season, and Texas is right there in the SEC title game, and they're a college football playoff fixture, then I will bump him up and much higher. I just want to see it first, right? And this is what got me caught off sides last year with Jackson Arnold, right? Is I was projecting out what I had seen from the kid in relief roles and thought, okay, he's ready to roll. Now, Arch Manning might be better than Jackson Arnold, and probably he is. Actually, he is better than Jackson Arnold. That's why he's ranked higher here. Okay, but is he going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC? We'll see. I think he has all the potential to be the best quarterback in college football. But until we see it, is it right to put him as the best quarterback in the SEC or above a guy that had 44 total touchdowns last year? I don't think it is.
That's where the tough part comes in. It's
potential meets production. It's right. I'm trying to merge both. What have you done versus what can you do? And it's a hard thing to do. And so I'm trying to give Arch a little bit of credit. That's why he's not down there with Jackson Arnold and the Austin Simmons and those guys that haven't really played a lot. I do respect the talent. I just want to see him do it for a full season as the guy, not in relief of Quinn Ewers.
No, I totally agree with that. And it kind of makes me think about, what was that? The Georgia game that he came in. The first one, not the conference championship game. He came in because they benched Quinn because Quinn was making some pretty awful mistakes. And then he goes out there and it wasn't much better at all. And they had to go ahead and switch right back. Yeah. I think that he'll learn from that. So that's not, of course. I don't think that's very much of a concern. But at the same time, I totally agree with you here that I need to see this production on the field happen first. The Mississippi State game and ULM, sure. Louisiana Monroe, you got to go out there and really cook or whatnot. You got to play in a lot of the warm-up games of the season, but that Georgia game was the one where I was just like, ooh, I don't think he's ready yet. Now, granted, he may have a better opportunity than the other Manning family members to be able to go out there and actually, play for a title. I mean, Peyton got close. He didn't. The next year, T. Martin goes in and wins national championship for Tennessee. So, some people like that. It kind of depends on how you feel. But the question's going to be, as you mentioned in your article, what does that offensive line look like for Texas with so many of them going out? And how do those young players step up and become that good? Of course, they're going to hype him. Totally understand that. But we've got to see if he's going to be protected. But then looking at Garrett Nussmeier is the one still to me that I think it's fascinating that everyone believes that he is anywhere near the status of a Jaden Daniels. Yeah. I don't see it in him. I think he's a solid quarterback. I don't see Joe Burrow. I don't see Jaden Daniels. I see a quarterback that can play, that we just hope that his head coach doesn't hold him back.
Yeah, I think the thing that impressed me the most was just the way he bounced back after getting crushed in the OU game. Like, I really thought he was done And everybody did. Everybody saw him
True.
get hit, and he laid on the ground and he walked off the way he walked off. And you're like, that's a collarbone. He's done for the season. Like, he's not coming back. Oklahoma's going to win this game. No big deal. My man showed back up and took it to another level. He basically finished Oklahoma like in just a couple throws. And to me, that bought a lot of goodwill with me, just because I saw the toughness, the ability to bounce back from a really, really hard hit. Like, he got hit so hard that I went, oh, as I was watching on my screen in my living room. And the fact that he came back from that, it just shows you the kind of player that he is. So, and I respect the yardage. Like, the yardage totals were huge. If LSU had any kind of a defense, or at least a better defense last year, they're a playoff team. But their defense kind of let them down in some games. And so, and did Nussmeier play perfectly? No. But I think what this shows more than anything is that the SEC is actually way more wide open than people want to give it credit for.
Agreed.
You look at the top, and I don't feel great about any team at the top of the SEC. And I'm not sitting here saying Oklahoma's going to go win it, but if you're just looking at it from a outsider's view, outside of Georgia, and that's more out of respect for what they did in their back-to-back national title run, outside of that, who do you love?
That's a good question. I think the only team that I'm really looking at is LSU right now. And it's only because they're bringing back their quarterback that could be considered the best one in the conference. But South Carolina's got to show me something. Well, Kyle Kennard's gone, but you still got Dylan Stewart. What does the rest of that defensive line look like? You got Nico Harbor as well as Lenore Sellers. Rocket Sanders, is he gone? I think he's gone as well. Yeah. So I don't know what they look like. No, you're 100% right. I have a lot of questions with every team. It's time to start breaking down every single roster and see, what they look like going into this spring ball, which will be in practice in 3 weeks.
It's coming fast. Spring ball is coming fast, and screw all the people that want to get rid of spring ball and spring game and all that jazz. No, we want this. Spring practices are fun. We want fun in college football.
They're a blast, but we're going to have a conversation about that on the next episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next time. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Locked On Sooners. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. That's the outro. That's where it comes in. got a little false start right there. Got the wrong signals from the sideline and put the wrong play in. So we had to recalibrate here. But that's going to do it. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow the show on all your favorite social media platforms at Locked On Sooners. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John 9 Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at Sooners Wire as well. You can also join us on the Locked On Sooners Insider Program by texting 405-817-6711. There, we'll take your questions. We'll give you insight that we may or may not share on the show, but we will definitely prioritize your questions for our mailbag episodes. So shoot us a question, text Sooners to 405-817-6711 at the Locked On Sooners Insider Program. But until next time, he's Jay, I'm John, Boomer
Sooner. Pew, pew, pew.
Boom, boom, boom.